3 steps to turn 50% more estimates into closed projects. This video is for remodeling contractors looking to scale their business. And if you don't know, my name is Evan Leibowitz. I've been running a marketing agency for the past 7 years. And in addition to that, my family also runs a family remodeling business. So this channel is an effort to combine both worlds together and give you as much value as possible. Now, I want you guys to know that we used to drop the ball on booked estimates. There's not many worse feelings than spending a bunch of money and time on marketing, generating leads, and then wondering why very few of them are actually turning into new projects. So I'm sure you guys have all been in a scenario that looks something like this, where maybe you're speaking to a lead, you end up booking them for that estimate. They seem really happy. Then you have the walkthrough with them. Things are really great. Maybe you guys vibe pretty well. They seem like a qualified person. But then after a few weeks, when you go send out the proposal to them, it ends up just being crickets. They end up ghosting you. There's an objection. Like they have to think about it, whatever the case might be. And then this is your scenario. You lost them and they told you they went with another contractor. Guys, this is a horrible feeling to be in. And while this isn't 100% avoidable, there are some things that we can do in our favor to reduce our odds of this happening. And I boiled this down to the top 3 things. So before I get into these 3 things, I just want to show you the power in increasing your estimate, your closing rate from, let's say, 20% to 30%. So let's just pretend that that was the only variable in our process that we directly influenced. And let's just pretend that our average job value is $30,000. Now, if we're converting 20% of those estimates into closed jobs, then we're sitting at roughly $120,000 in monthly revenue. Now, let's say that we convert 30% now. That's the only factor that we change. Now, we're sitting at $180,000 in monthly revenue. Over the course of a year, that's an additional $720,000. Not too shabby, if you ask me. So this is really the importance of fixing this metric. So let's get into the first point. The first one is going to be speed to lead. So there's some stats online that show that you're up to 21 times more likely to convert an internet lead if you contact them within 5 minutes of opt-in. And I think this is the trap that a lot of contractors get caught into, is they're so used to growing their business on referrals where that speed isn't nearly as important. So if you get, let's say, a referral from a client and it's one of their friends or family members, that person probably doesn't have many objections. They're probably not shopping around and getting quotes from other contractors, at least not in the initial stages. They already feel comfortable because it's a warm referral. So these people, you don't necessarily need to hop onto it right away because they sort of have a flexible schedule in their mind with you. But then when you start marketing to cold traffic, it's another story. You're just some stranger on the internet where they saw your advertisement or found you on Google, but they don't really know much about you. And ultimately, you are not their number one priority. So maybe they opted in through your ad, but then 30 minutes later, they have to hop on the road to go to some event. Maybe they're just finished dinner, they're putting their kids to bed an hour after they opt into your ad. So it's much more important to strike them while the iron is hot, so to speak. And the solution to do this properly is you can either hire someone to do this or use automations. Now, I know you might be thinking, well, I can just do it myself. I promise I'll be conscientious about this. And I will tell you right now, even if you are in the beginning, it's certainly not a long-term solution, because if you're busy on the job site, especially if you're still working in the business, I can promise you, you will not have time to do this as thoroughly as you need to. So just to show you kind of like a visual, This is one of the workflows that we have set up within our agency that we use for all of our clients. And we set this up so that as soon as a lead comes in, they're being sent out an immediate text message and an email within 1 minute of opt-in. So this ensures that, this first text that gets sent out 60 seconds after they opt in has a high likelihood of response rate. Same thing, if they don't respond to that, then we're going to send out another text 2 hours later, and then another one a couple hours after that. And then this follow-up process will continue. Most people are just lacking something like this, hence why they can't ever even contact the lead in the first place. So moving on to step number 2 is going to be lead pre-qualification. So how you market determines who's entering into your ecosystem. And one problem that I hear from a lot of contractors is they might be attracting tire kicker leads, unqualified people, not their ideal clients. And usually the reason why this happens is because there's either something wrong with their messaging, or they don't have enough friction within their marketing process to basically pre-qualify leads. So let me talk about the messaging first. An ideal messaging could be something like, when you're calling out your ideal avatar based on their lifestyle, their family, what hobbies or interests they have. So for example, are you looking for an outdoor space your spouse and kids will want to spend every summer evening by? So the first thing, we're calling out the ideal desired product, an outdoor space. Then we're mentioning spouse and kids. So that alone is pre-qualifying people that are married, maybe have a combined income, things like this that your ideal avatar might fit into. And then spend every summer evening by. So this is kind of like promising them what their lifestyle could be like. All right. So this is one example of proper messaging. Now, improper messaging, which a lot of people get caught in the trap of, could be something like discounts. Like, hey, are you looking for a cheap price on your next kitchen remodel? Well, for a limited time, you can get 30% off when you opt in today. That's not really calling out what an ideal prospect of yours probably wants. What's going to be more important to them is having a reliable contractor, someone who's worked with other clients that match their profile, versus just getting like the cheapest price. I've talked about this in other videos, but instead of just relying on discounts or like price-based offers, you could also look into things like speed, convenience, risk reversals. I've even seen some companies do donations to charity or giveaways. These, in my opinion, are all very good and probably better than just relying on discounts. Now, the second part that I mentioned is adding more friction to your opt-in process. So aside from messaging, we can also purposely add more steps into our funnel and basically give these people more hurdles to jump before they just become a lead. So if we look at like a contact form like this, we're collecting all of the basic details, as you can see, like the name, the email, phone number, city. We're asking them to describe some of their project details. And then we're also asking a couple qualifying questions like, when's their ideal time frame to start? So this is very important because if someone says as soon as possible, they're more likely to be qualified versus someone who just answers not sure yet, or 3 months from now, 6 months from now, whatever. Same thing with budget range. If someone puts that they only have $10,000, but they're looking for like a whole home renovation, well, they're either very misinformed or probably just not very qualified. So consider this if you find yourself dealing with a lot of leads that maybe are just price shoppers or not your ideal fit. Now, moving on to step number 3, this is going to be making sure that you warm up the lead throughout the whole process. And I would say out of all of these points, this one is probably the most underrated step in most people's marketing strategies. What most contractors do is they'll see a lead come in, they'll try and call that lead. If they are able to speak to them, they'll book that estimate. And then that's pretty much it. They're done. There's nothing else. What most people forget about is with a typical sales process, you have the before, then you have the during, which would be meeting them in person, and then you have the after. What a lot of contractors do is they'll only focus on this portion, the during. meaning they're going to wait to meet with the prospects. That's when they're going to try and overflow them with a bunch of value. So they shake their hands, they look at their house, and then they say, okay, here's what I recommend for this. We had a client in a very similar situation as you. Here's what we do, blah, blah, blah. And yes, this part of the sales process is very important, but you are shooting yourself in the foot if you're not also focusing on what happens before that estimate and what happens after that estimate. There's a huge missed opportunity in most people's marketing strategies. One example, this is going to be more so for the before, is after a lead submits a form, what are you doing to provide value initially? So do you have, let's say, like a thank you page video that explains the next steps? In other words, after someone submits a form, on the next page of your sales process, you should have a video that briefly introduces yourself, mentions that you're excited to meet with the prospect, talks about what to expect, what the next steps look like, all of that. That's going to build a lot of trust. It's going to make them feel more comfortable and pre-handle some maybe skepticism or unsure about their project. Also, having frequently asked questions or objection handling videos that basically get sent after the estimate is sent, but also before. We want to pre-address objections before they come up. We want to answer frequently asked questions, anything around price, anything around time frame. The more that we could handle this upfront, the less likely they are to just hand it to you when you basically ask for the sale. Having a welcome email flow. So every day, ideally, you want to send out an email as soon as a lead comes in, answer frequently asked questions again, show case studies, put in client reviews, all of that. We just want to stay top of mind. I would also encourage you to have your prospects follow you on social media. And this means you, as the business owner, posting frequently on social media as well. So you guys should be posting on your stories every day. Make your highlights active, separate them by frequently asked questions versus behind the scenes content versus transformations, all of that. And client testimonials and case studies pushed throughout all the means that I talked about. So email, social media, texting the clients, putting them in your proposals. That's a huge missed opportunity. Don't just include the price and the line items. Also at the bottom, include some testimonials from clients. So if you do all of this strategy properly, it should look something like this, where you pretty much have a string of different email sequences, videos. Some of these could be like SMS if you want. Some of these could be through email, retargeting ads. So we're staying top of mind so that over the course of the next few months, your prospect has no other option but to remember your company. So I think the key takeaway with this whole video is to make sure that you're being persistent with your follow-up, but also providing value before, during, and after you meet with the prospects. Most people, as I said, only focus on the during, which is a huge mistake because it forces you to have to do a lot of extra work basically in a short time frame, and you're much more likely to deal with these objections and uncertainties and thus have a less than stellar booking ratio. Now, if you run a remodeling business and you would like help scaling your business, that's exactly what my agency focuses on. We specialize in using paid traffic and automation systems to help remodeling contractors scale. So click the link in the description, book a call. We'll see if we can help you out. Now, increasing your booking ratio for your remodeling business is definitely a great tool to have, but you also need leads in order to create business in the first place. And if you're having trouble doing that, I'm going to link a video right here that you could check out, which talks about how to generate remodeling leads with meta ads in 2026. Proven strategy. Check it out. You won't want to miss it.